Marriage/engagement photographers/videographers of Reddit, have you developed a sixth sense for which marriages will flourish and which will not? What are the green and red flags? Ex-wedding photographer. Typically I saw red flags when the bride or groom is super quiet. I mean silent and just watching. One instance was a groom who barely said 10 words to anyone during the ceremony or reception afterwards. The bride and her mother were extremely loud and excited the entire time. The bride needed everything to be perfect. I dropped off the photo bundle with him 2 weeks later, and he was still quiet. She however complained about all of the pictures because the groom wasn't smiling enough. She wanted a discount because I couldn't make him look happy enough. They got divorced about a year later. I know because I did his engagement photos with his new fiancée about 4 years after his first wedding. His engagement photos showed him much happier. Edit. I stopped doing weddings, but I do some portraits and mostly commercial and product work. He called me for a wedding quote, but I had stopped doing them at that point. I do still do portraits, so I offered to do engagement photos for him that he was happy with. Photographer here. I've done a few engagement photos and weddings. Red flags. When one person is critical of the other during the shoot, but then posts the photos with the caption, "About to marry my best friend and my soulmate." Also, when they badly Photoshop themselves and their partners to appear better looking than they actually are. Green flags. A couple who can laugh together when doing awkward poses, when they are wiping sweat from their foreheads, and when something goes wrong in general. Edit. Goodness, this blew up. To answer a few questions, I only edit the lighting and background of photos. I have never and will never edit someone's body. Once I have been paid for my edited photos, I do believe the photos belong to the couple and they are free to tweak them any way they like. Although, I do think there is no need to edit your face/body. People who are truly happy for you don't care how perfect you look in your photos. Besides, I think that genuine love and happiness make the most beautiful photos, not a slim waist and perfect skin. To address the wiping of the sweat, I did a photoshoot for a couple in the middle of an intense Texas summer. It was incredibly hot and humid that day and the man was sweating rivers. Him and his fiancée were such good sports about it though. I've done photoshoots for brides to be who get extremely offended and angry when their partner doesn't look perfect. I was very happy that this particular bride to be just had a good time taking silly photos with her fiancé. Honestly, their photos turned out great. Cake artist here. I had a couple come in for a tasting. Appointment was for 7 PM, but he was late. First half hour was just her. She told me they met at a stable where they both kept their horses. Those horses were going to be featured at the wedding as the bride and groom would ride them to the site, a beautiful farm venue. She described in detail her self-designed medieval gown, flower wreath in her hair, embroidered shoes like some from a museum. Sounded lovely. She wanted a cake like a castle, which was a specialty of mine. The whole wedding would be over the top, but not in a cringy way. Then he arrives, barely says hi to her, sits down and starts telling me about his wedding. He'll ride and dressed as a riverboat gambler with a frock coat, brocade vest, string tie, big hat, gold pocket watch, and sterling silver spurs. He's fine with a castle cake, but wants to incorporate the watch and a pair of mother-of-pearl handled pistols. Picture given. I had already decided that I was not going to work with them. No way could I come up with a cake that would work for them. But they were there, so I brought out the samples. For the next hour they carried on 2 entirely separate monologues. They didn't address each other or me, and they didn't listen to each other or me. I made no attempt to book them that night, and when they called later in the week I told them their date had been taken. They were living in 2 incompatible and entirely self-contained fantasies. I doubt they even made it to the wedding day. Ex-wedding photographer here. There were only a couple situations where I had doubts about the couple's future, and one where I was certain. I met the couple in a cafe to discuss their ideas and my services. The girl was very happy. She was very emotional and interested. The guy, however, was rolling his eyes and grunting at everything, and I stopped trying to get him involved in the conversation after he ignored me twice. It made the girl very uncomfortable, and she was apologetic of his behavior. I don't know what happened to them, as they apparently chose to reschedule their wedding and didn't hire me in the end. I declined shooting a wedding when the person who was going to hire me was the groom's mom. When I asked her to arrange a meeting with the couple, she said that they didn't want a wedding, meaning they wanted to elope, and it was her initiative to celebrate it. I tried to play I want to hear bride's ideas card, but she told me the bride has no ideas, she obeys the groom, and the groom obeys mom. So I'll only talk to the mom. So I declined. I hope the girl is fine. No one deserves a controlling mill. Finally, I was a guest and a photographer at my friend's wedding. The bridesmaid was wearing a short white dress, and she was chirping about her side hustle modeling for photos and catalogs, how her boyfriend saw her in so many wedding dresses he won't be surprised when she wears one to the wedding, and how she caught 8 bouquets already. This will be her 9th. She talked a lot about wedding planning and stuff, but apparently there hadn't even been a formal proposal, and her boyfriend, who was a guest as well, looked very annoyed and clearly wished he were somewhere else. Anyway, the bridesmaid started bugging me for photos of her and her boyfriend a week after the wedding. I told her several times that when I start editing the photos, I will do hers first, and by the time I sent her the photos, they were already broken up. She started dating someone else a month later and got married the next year. Edit. Grammar. Wedding videographer here. I don't usually follow the marriage all that closely after the video is delivered, but usually you have a feeling as a neutral third party about whether it's going to last or not. While I agree with most of the stuff mentioned here, I found that the microcosm of how the couple feels about each other usually comes out during the cake cutting. If they're drinking, then they've usually had a few by that point, and it's a moment when everyone is watching you do something potentially awkward with your new so. When I see a new bride or groom aggressively smush cake into the other's face, I usually feel like that's a strong sign of an unbalanced relationship. Sometimes they're both having fun with it, and you can tell it's cool, but most of the time you can tell that the person with cake on their face is either shocked or angry about it. Again, I don't have hard data to track results, but that's the thing that usually informs my opinion about how it's going to work out. Edit. Thanks for the silver. Also thanks for sharing all the stories about the cake smushes that have led to long and happy marriages. It seems like it's definitely more about the attitude of the couple and how they react than the actual act itself. I used to work in day of wedding coordination, and I remember 2 couples that I couldn't wait to hear about. The divorce. When you pay a wedding coordinator, you only pay for the things the coordinator orders/plans, flowers, catering, DJ, plus coordinator fees. Anything else couples buy, dresses, gifts, suits, etc., are added. We estimated this to be a $500,000 wedding. Easy. Dad paying for all of it. The bride was a total sweetheart when I met her. The groom seemed quiet, but was very easygoing. Always nice to have a sober groom, and he didn't drink a drop during the day. Then the photographer/videographer left to take some venue shots. The bride began berating everyone, myself included, on how her perfect day had to be capped out because no one wanted to give her more. My clothes were trashy, the DJ's computer was a PC, the bar staff we are wearing red vests, and she hates vests. Photographer came back, and she was an angel again. The second was a wedding of a general and pediatric surgeon in the local hospital. Paid for their own beautiful and in their means wedding. The bride was seriously amazing. But there was a mix-up day if the wedding. The 200 chairs that we are supposed to be moved to the 3rd story of the historic building weren't taken upstairs. So my boss, the other assistant, and the 8-month pregnant venue coordinator start carrying chairs upstairs 3 flights. It wasn't great. After the wedding, we had to do it again, but down. The father of the groom started helping us. We begged him to enjoy his son's day, but he responded that if it were his daughter doing this, he'd be furious. Groom comes by and tells his dad to stop helping the pregnant woman stack chairs. He looks at the monster, that is his son, and asked how he'd feel if it was his wife or sister who had to do this. Groom told his dad that maybe, if we had applied ourselves a little more, we wouldn't have been taking out the trash at a successful couple's wedding. Clearly he didn't know how much his wife was paying us. I'm a videographer. Most weddings we video are fairly smooth. Couple is happy. Family cries tears of joy. Lots of laughter. That bit. We did film one wedding. That seemed fine right up until the aisle walk point. We video the bride and groom prep. They have 2 suites, one for the ladies and one for the gentlemen. My partner and I were having an easy time running back and forth. Everyone is drinking. Not light beer either. I mean knocking back shots. Empty bottles everywhere. Offering us rounds too as they go by. Everyone is pretty carefree, upbeat, and ready to party. The bride and groom most of all. This is going to be the easiest wedding we film. Or so we thought. Now everyone is seated in the ceremony hall. Groom and all his men are up front with the officiant. Bridesmaids start walking down the aisle. All beautiful. The bride walks in with her father. At this point I'm filming the groom and his reaction. We get a wide shot, because we can always zoom in during post. My partner is recording the groom and her father. I see the best man in my viewfinder pull out a flask from his jacket pocket. The rest of the men do the same except groom. So this is clearly planned. The best man speaks loud enough over the music, so people turn to him away from the bride. He raises his glass high and shouts, "Here's to bride name, here's to groom name, may you never disagree." But if you do, he points at the bride with his flask hand and finishes, "Fuck you, here's to groom name." They all drink to their frat boy toast. The best man hands the groom his flask, and he drinks it laughing. I have never watched a video more than I have the reaction of the bride and her father. Jaw drop, speechless. The ceremony went on. And it's not done. The officiant asks the bride, "Do you take groom yada yada?" and she surprisingly, yet weakly, says yes. The officiant asks the same of the groom, and instead of just saying yes, he screams, "Fuck da fuck yeah I do." Bride just face palms herself in embarrassment. The look of disgust on her whole family's face the entire night after that was priceless and highly awkward to film. I could go on with more stories about this wedding, but this just about the bride and groom. Needless to say, I think that's a big red flag. TLDR, best man raises his flask as bride is walking down the aisle and says, "Here's to bride, here's to groom, may you never disagree, but if you do, fuck you," pointing at bride. "Here's to groom." All groomsmen drink from flasks including the groom. Wedding photographer here, been shooting for a while, of late with a reputed brand in Singapore. Don't think anyone knows me on Reddit, so I'm pretty safe. I'm also recently married, so I understand the signs I see, having gone through them, and hopefully and thankfully are able to recognize, and can be mature through them with my wife, when we see them surface. Disclaimer, not all the time the red flags equate to a breakup in marriage. You'll be surprised how durable relationships are, and how much compromise and forgiveness goes through a marriage. If you can't understand that, you are either need to experience marriage, or are too immature to understand it. Red flags, bride/groom's illness. I tend to eliminate right from the start these people, because it means certain trouble for vendors like us, because their demands show their personality. Often these demanding "it's about me" attitudes are a major downfall in relationships and marriages. The couple refuses to pay. If you're basically going to be an asshole to vendors, there's no way you won't be an asshole to your partner at some point, because money is a big issue and it often means it will become an issue to either of you down the road. The couple argues in front of you. I've seen it happen. I've even seen a couple early in my first few shooting years. It happened a lot when I was starting out, because I was going for cheap while entering the industry because of the lack of my experience, which means you get people who only go for cheap, which also means they're really cheap people, and I encountered a couple who met me to pick up the pictures and they looked like they just had a really big fight before meeting me. The couple invites tons of people to the wedding dinner banquet. Chinese dinners are 8 to 10 course dinners, and are quite expensive per seat, and there are tables empty. We are talking each table of 10 people costs around $2K. When the banquet begins, the couple splurges super big time on the wedding and I enter their house and I see them actually living as simpletons, or from very humble backgrounds. Knowing their professions also tell me that they are clearly not able to afford this wedding. I know immediately it's going to go downhill from here with the debt they're already carrying into their marriage. Good luck to paying off the $100K wedding before even buying your house. House and car here in Singapore is impossibly expensive, at least $100K for a car, and between $500K 1 meters for a house. Go look it up. Green flags. Wedding photographer here. Been shooting for a while, of late with a reputed brand in Singapore. Don't think anyone knows me on Reddit, so I'm pretty safe. I'm also recently married, so I understand the signs I see, having gone through them, and hopefully and thankfully are able to recognize, and can be mature through them with my wife, when we see them surface. Disclaimer, not all the time the red flags equate to a breakup in marriage. You'll be surprised how durable relationships are, and how much compromise and forgiveness goes through a marriage. If you can't understand that, you are either need to experience marriage, or are too immature to understand it. Red flags. Bride/groom zealous. I tend to eliminate right from the start these people, because it means certain trouble for vendors like us, because their demands show their personality. Often these demanding it's about me attitudes are a major downfall in relationships and marriages. The couple refuses to pay. If you're basically going to be an asshole to vendors, there's no way you won't be an asshole to your partner at some point, because money is a big issue and it often means it will become an issue to either of you down the road. The couple argues in front of you. I've seen it happen. I've even seen a couple early in my first few shooting years. It happened a lot when I was starting out, because I was going for cheap while entering the industry, because of the lack of my experience, which means you get people who only go for cheap, which also means they're really cheap people, and I encountered a couple who met me to pick up the pictures and they looked like they just had a really big fight before meeting me. The couple invites tons of people to the wedding dinner banquet. Chinese dinners are 8 to 10 course dinners, and are quite expensive per seat, and there are tables empty. We are talking each table of 10 people costs around $2K. When the banquet begins, the couple splurges super big time on the wedding and I enter their house and I see them actually living as simpletons, or from very humble backgrounds. Knowing their professions also tell me that they are clearly not able to afford this wedding. I know immediately it's going to go downhill from here with the debt they're already carrying into their marriage. Good luck to paying off the $100K wedding before even buying your house. House and car here in Singapore is impossibly expensive, at least $100K for a car, and between $500K 1 meters for a house. Go look it up. Green flags. The couple makes the wedding about their guests. The couple meets every person and thanks them, and people can't wait to help them and support them through the wedding. I can't emphasize this point anymore. People literally come round to help these people and stay late and sacrifice time willingly because they love them. These guys have something great about them that everyone sees, and they are going to last for sure. The couple accommodates every vendor and pays on time. They know what they are doing. When I see the couple encounter a really massive screw up, how they react is really the deal breaker for me. I've seen the lights go out at the banquet hall for a good 30 minutes and the guests were already kind of freaking out, but the bride and groom stayed chill. I instantly knew they were going to last. If they could be cool through a massively big day in their lives, they'd be cool when rocky stuff happens. I might have more later. I'll come back to edit if I think of them. Again, the disclaimer, they don't often are a hard and fast rule to whether they stay or break, but the TLDR is, if they are assholes and think about themselves, they often crack later on at each other. If they are caring to each other and people around them, it usually lasts for good. Edited for formatting. I'm not a wedding photographer, but I had my own intuitions about a couple once that turned out right. I went to a wedding with my girlfriend at the time a few years ago. She and I had only been together for about 6 months, so it was actually the first time I had met either one of them. I didn't say anything to my girlfriend at the time, because I didn't know them at all aside from stories she told me, but I felt like they wouldn't last very long. At the reception, she spent most of her time just talking with her friends, and didn't interact much with anyone else at all. He went around and tried to get time with everyone, but every so often I would see him with her, and she would kind of not even acknowledge that he was there very much. When I walked past her one time on the way to grab a beer, she was bragging to her friends about how much money the dress cost her, and how he wanted her to get a cheaper one, but she wouldn't have it. At one point of the night, I was outside smoking with some of the other guests and he came out the back and asked to bum a cigarette. He was one of those types of people that only smokes when they are drunk, which apparently wasn't that often for him, since he was doing his residency at a hospital, so he was always really busy. The entire time he kept looking at the door, and whenever it opened and someone came out, he quickly moved his hand holding the cigarette behind his back because he thought it was her. It was like he was deathly scared of her, and not like in a playful way. It didn't surprise me when about a year later they got divorced. Apparently, she just kind of was taking advantage of him, staying home all day. She didn't work, spending thousands of dollars ordering clothes and shoes online using his money and credit cards she took out for them. Boudoir photographer here. Quick, if ya didn't know, boudoir albums are a popular gift from brides to grooms. The experience and resulting photos are typically a huge ego boost for the bride and a cherished bonus for the groom. Typically, we have a professional hairstylist and makeup artist on site to really glam up the bride. Most clients bring a friend, and we encourage this, for their comfort. Relaxed, happy people make the best photos, after all. Green flags, the day goes smoothly, and they are eager to buy an album afterwards, and we get a stellar review, and they go on to seemingly have a happy healthy marriage. Bonus, we get emails or calls later from the groom expressing his fondness for the photos, thanking us for boosting her confidence, making her look gorgeous, etc, and now he wants a wall print. Neat. Red flags, if they spend the bulk of the time complaining with their friend about the groom's opinions and behavior, the relationship tends to fizzle out before the wedding. Worse yet, bride spends bulk of the time upset, texting her groom, or having arguments over the phone, because he doesn't like the idea of someone else seeing her in her underwear, and is sabotaging the shoot from afar. If a bride has ugly cried during a boudoir shoot arguing with her husband-to-be, 9/10 that marriage doesn't happen. Next scenario, instead of just a trusted friend, sometimes the bride will bring the groom to the shoot. This itself isn't uncommon. Sometimes the groom is genuinely her best friend and everything is smooth. Green flags, she feels comfortable, it's easier to get her laughing and smiling, and he can make requests such as, "Do that look you gave me at the Taco Bell last week," and they get to work on inside jokes and fun things for their memories. Red flags, with a specific horrifying story. Groom is a jealous, possessive, controlling a-hole who tries to run the photo shoot. We had a guy come in and start choosing her clothing, argued with the hairstylist, and added his own tips to every pose I set up. He spent more time criticizing her than actually being helpful, and then. So we get the little bottles of wine, like you'd find in a mini bar, and offer one to the client to help with nerves. But only one. We don't want a drunk model, obviously. On this occasion, the bride politely declined the wine and said she was fine. The groom, however, happily took one. When the staff wasn't watching him, he'd grab another one from the fridge and down it like a shot. We later counted, and he had 12 of them, becoming more of an asshole with every gulp. Point, he was sitting on the far side of the room, out of frame, and belting his suggestions at her the entire time, laughing at his own choice of words most of the time. Early on, I thought they just enjoyed playfully insulting each other, but this guy took it way too far. He said things like, "Arch your back more, put yours down, you look like a Borno," and, "I kid you not, raise your face, I see your double chin." Childish giggle. We finally had to stop the shoot early when he physically tried to the camera away from me. Me, "Sir, I'm happy to show you the images, but please don't grab my camera. It's $3,000, and I'm sure you don't want that on the bill." Him, "I gotta make sure you didn't see her cooter." Me, "You can't see." Shows him. Him, "Well, I did. I was staring right at it when you snapped the pic." Me, "You were also way over there." Him, "How do I know you didn't see it?" Me, shows him the last few photos, because A, I'm over here, and B, if something shows in the photos that you're uncomfortable with, we can edit the crop or the shadows to hide sensitive content. Him, "I don't appreciate you trying to see my lady naked." Me, "Sir, she's naked. I'm trying to make some artwork for you t." Him, "Give me that camera." I took a big step back as he lunged, and he tripped over an ottoman, cutting. I think we are done here. I stepped off to the side of the studio and asked the stylists to help the client get dressed/packed. She was in tears. The a-hole stepped out for a smoke while she got packed, and the bride, crying, apologized profusely for bringing him. She told me they had had arguments leading up to the photo shoot and he insisted on being the person she brought. She agreed and decided then that their future hinged on his behavior, and he totally blew it. As other posts have more articulately pointed out, you can tell a whole lot about a relationship by how they interact with each other. Thankfully, the horror stories are rare. TLDR, possessive jealous fiancé gets drunk, ruins photo shoot, relationship ends edit, added wiki blurb and TLDR. Long time wedding photographer here. I've been in the business long enough to have seen a few of my couples get divorced. So yes, there is a sixth sense. One common red flag was the groom's attitude toward the whole wedding. If it was just about getting plastered with his buddies, that's a huge red flag point. But even some of the ones who I thought were really sweet and into each other ended in divorce. I think with some you never can tell, but with others it is plainly obvious that their marriage was a train wreck from the beginning. I think another red flag is if the bride constantly went back to her parents to consult or complain about challenges or issues that popped up instead of talking it out with her groom. It was a bad sign. It's possible that couples who do this can change, but it has always been a red flag if either of them is too attached to mom and dad's fixing their problems rather than working on it with each other. Other red flags: the wedding where the bride's dad brought a shotgun to the wedding, divorced. If either of the couple looks down on the other one, pretty much doomed. Have kids together before marriage, divorced. Vastly incompatible religious views, divorced. Most military weddings I've shot, divorced second or third marriages, higher than average divorces. Married really young, surprisingly not as big a factor as you'd think. Many are still together. Not a photographer, but I got married last year and we ran into an issue on our wedding day that totally affirmed that I'd made the right decision in marrying my husband. Our wedding day was hot, 98 degrees with 70% humidity, and both our wedding and reception were outside. I was wearing my multi-layered dress for hours, and I was miserable. About 2 hours into the reception, I realized how hot I was. I was soaked. I was shaking. I started to feel like I was going to faint. My husband took me to the changing room, which was air conditioned, and suggested that I take my dress off, which I didn't want to do because it was my wedding dress, and we hadn't finished the photos. But as soon as he said it, I realized nothing sounded better. I couldn't wait to get that damn dress off. So he helped me. I commenced having a huge panic attack, the worst I'd ever had. Keep in mind that our vows were over. It was just the heat and the pressure of the reception stressing me out. My husband stayed with me and comforted me and made me feel better. When I didn't want to put my dress back on, I ended up wearing my sister's bridesmaid dress the rest of the day. I was worried that our photographer was going to be mad about not finishing the photos. He was a bit high-strung and not entirely nice. My husband merely said, "Don't worry babe, I'll deal with it." And he went and explained that there would be no more photos. Just the way he handled the whole situation on literally the most stressful day of our lives was so impressive and reminded me of why I was marrying him. Edit. Funnily enough, our photographer did manage to capture the moment I thought I was about to hit the floor at my own wedding. Here's me feeling terrible and my husband cluing into the fact that I didn't feel well. Wedding photographer here. Was shooting pictures at the registrar for the couple whose reception I shot. Registrar says, so you both consent in a healthy state of mind and of your own free will to get married and these are your witnesses. Dude, groom, goes on full lockdown and the bride, I knew her from my school. She was my senior and one of the notorious types even then. Not the brightest bulb either, too. So the registrar laughs it off and asks the same thing in the local language. They both go yes 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 yes. The thing wasn't that they weren't well read or given better opportunities to learn. Shit. I went to the same school as the bride and turned out fine, and neither that they were poor or something, because she is from a pretty well-off family and the dude's mother basically had more gold on her than the bride did. In the entirety of the 3 days I'd spent photographing them, I'd never realized until then, gee, these two aren't stupid in love. These two are just stupid. You don't need a sixth sense to tell that that's not gonna last long, because someday one of these two is going to be smarter than the other, and it'll be too much for either of them to handle. Yikes. Had a good laugh about it at the shop later. Feel bad for them though. If you're getting married, here are a few things to remember. from someone who has seen a lot of weddings. If you're not careful, your wedding can ruin your marriage. Contrary to what popular culture will have you believe, a wedding isn't open permission to be drunk and crass. It's a rite of passage. If you and your partner take it seriously, it can become the foundation of a new stage in your relationship. If you treat your wedding like a cheap carnival ride, you're likely to end up going home with one of the connies. You can have a ton of fun without denigrating your spouse or the institution of marriage. It's hip to be too cool for commitment. The best marriages I have seen and watched grow are the ones where the individuals in them are totally into each other. This includes a few open marriages I'm aware of. They may have multiple partners, but the core couple is inseparable. Anger has no place on a wedding day. Stress is part of it, yes. But if you're hating that person as you walk down the aisle, something I have seen more than once, you're in the wrong story. If your wedding is making you angry, you need to simplify. A long engagement helps. This is from personal experience. We took 2 years to plan. We broke everything down into steps, made most of our decorations. My wife bought an inexpensive but beautiful gown, and did her alterations, made her own veil, etc. Planning further out gives you flexibility on dates, and yes, book halls and church first, as far in advance as possible. Red flags: grooms who take no part in any of the planning, and grooms who joke constantly about how much everything costs, or how ridiculous it is they had to pay for a wedding at all. Vegas. Parents who try to influence the proceedings, or control element of the day in a way the bride and groom dislike. How people treat the photographer is a huge indicator of how they treat people in a business relationship or really anyone who works in the service industry. And that's a huge indicator of what they are like as a person. If they are rude to people they consider employees, photographers, wait staff, cooks, etc., steer clear. They think of themselves as better than other people, and eventually, they'll think of themselves as superior to you. Every Bridezilla I've ever followed up on is divorced. It doesn't always happen fast, but it has happened in every case. I'm glad to say, though, that I haven't worked with many of those. A keg in the church parking lot. When the dude brothers in the wedding party start drinking before the ceremony or immediately after, there's going to be ugly drama. When the bride and groom spend more time with their respective wedding parties and not much time talking to each other throughout the day, there's trouble in paradise. The more expensive the wedding, the less likely they are going to make it. An open bar. Any exes in the wedding party who used to date the bride or groom. In one case, there was a maid of honor who had dated the bride and groom back in the day, separately. She ended the reception a sweaty crying mess. But that was after the bride and groom had left, so they didn't see her meltdown. Banana straws and inflatable dicks. Dollar dances with the bride. Groping of any kind. Even if it's a wedding game. Green flags in expensive backyard weddings. Laughter, especially under pressure. General physical affection, especially when no one seems to be looking. Hugs. I'll always remember a bride who hugged her husband and then adjusted his hairpiece and tie while laughing. It's a moment that's burned into my memory. Not mashing cake. No humiliation during the ceremony or reception. No mean-spirited pranks. Neither wedding party engaging strippers. Only one couple that I worked with that I thought was going to make it forever divorced, and in that case, it looks very amiable. They're friendly acquaintances of mine. That's how I got the job, and you can see that they co-parent and do holidays together with their kids and are just generally happier now that they're with new partners. In my view, weddings should be relatively simple. The more pageantry, the less the people in question are thinking about each other. My wife and I had a mix of both elaborate and simple element, and that really seemed to work. And that's a big change in me that my wife brought on. I wanted to have lots of surprise element and theatrical happenings. She reminded me that she wanted to spend the day with me, not worrying about a production. Thankfully, she got through my thick skull. Next to the births of my children, my wedding day was absolutely the best day of my life. You only get to have 2 parties like it in a lifetime, and the second one, you don't get to be there for. Make it a good one. Take it to heart, and enjoy it. Wedding photographer for 10 plus years, 160 or so weddings. Predictive dynamics, stress imbalances. Typically one partner is more stressed on wedding day than the other, but the further the distance between stress levels, the less of a chance I'd give them. Who is barking orders to family? Who is irritated the flowers are 5 minutes late? Who is annoyed the guy's vests are not quite the shade of grey they were supposed to be? If both F&K and F&K are equally stressed, that's well and good. If one is unable to be in the moment and seeing red, though, while the other is floating on clouds, that's bad. When life stress hits in the weeks following the ceremony, we can almost hear their fights. Now, family intrusions. The over-involved mom whose pick for bridesmaid dresses ended up trumping the brides during planning. The brash sister who interrupts the bride during getting ready time. The partner in crime brother whose best man speech includes references to the groom sleeping around during his party years and the groom is too busy laughing to notice his now wife's mortification. The wedding whose not so recently deceased matronly grandmother gets more references during speech time than bride and groom. Family is important, and a key aspect of any wedding is the bringing of two, or sometimes more, families together, but family should always come second to couple on wedding day, or else it predicts one or more voices getting drowned out in the years to come. Not a recipe for matrimonial bliss. Offhanded comments. Sure, I'll have a swig. Just give me a mint. She'll freak if she knows I drank before the ceremony. Texts his mom to bring it. Don't ask him. He'll forget to bring it, like he forgets everything else. These sorts of comments on wedding day betray the early onset of secrecy, bitterness, disrespect, but I see this all the time. Reception isolation. Bride's on the dance floor all night with her girls, while he's outside smoking cigars all night with his college buddies. No one expects that bride and groom should be inseparable on wedding day, but geez, sometimes it's like they already can't stand each other. One is vastly more drunk than the other. The amount of alcohol consumed on wedding night itself has no predicative value so far as I can see, except when one partner is slurring and the other is on cleanup detail. Whatever level of inebriation is appropriate for the celebration, bride and groom should be on roughly the same journey. This night is about the two of you. If one won't remember how the night ended, it better be both. The implications for why this is are fairly obvious, so I'll move on. Unemotional first looks. Not everyone is a crier, I understand, but I've seen some first looks where the couple seemed almost bored. Not a good sign. Booty grinding with members of the opposite sex during dance time. A little raunchiness in the spirit of good times is quite common, but sometimes the level of flirtation is so shocking I wonder if that dude and the bride are old flames, or maybe about to light one in the nearest bathroom stall. These are a few that come first to mind. Photographer here. Yeah, you can usually tell when something is wrong. We have done about 50 wedding at this point. We have had 3 people break up in those 50 that we know of so far. We are candid or photojournalistic style, so we don't make people fake smile. We have had 1 divorce and 2 people call off the wedding and break up. The divorce, you could tell something was wrong from the moment we sat down with them. She seemed really excited and happy, and it seemed like he would rather be on fire than talking to us. We just figured he didn't like photos. During the engagement shoot, he would look away from her after kissing. He didn't want to lift her up, and he would rather talk about his job than his wedding planning was going. They broke up 6 months after the wedding. The 2 people that called off their wedding were the same way. One of them was super happy and really into it, and the other one was absolutely in misery. You can tell when someone doesn't like PDA or uncomfortable having their photo taken. But for a few, there is no love. We have done a few engagement shoots with the weddings coming up this year. I almost guarantee they won't make it. I hope I'm wrong, but time will tell. Late to respond, so this will probably get buried. Ex-photographer and wedding planner. I had a couple hire my business partner and I to plan their wedding. Throughout the planning process the groom was present, but pretty quiet. Mostly just yes dear and sure, if that's what you want. He was actually a really nice guy. The bride, on the other hand, was obsessed with the details. The colors of her wedding had to exactly match the label from their favorite bottle of wine. The centerpieces all had to be just so. She kept talking about how the resort they were staying at for their honeymoon was giving them a free gift. The kicker was as the ceremony started, groom was at the altar, bridesmaids had already walked down the aisle. She was about to start walking down the aisle solo. I don't remember why there wasn't a father figure walking her down. And the bride turns to my business partner and says, I think the band is playing a slightly different version of this song than I wanted." At that point in the day, most happy couples are so focused on each other that they barely notice the guests around them, let alone the music, because they are so wrapped up in the moment of getting married to their best friend and all. During the reception, the photographer, DJ, site coordinator, my business partner and I all made guesses about how long the marriage would last. I think the longest guess was 5 years. Halfway through their honeymoon in Jamaica, the groom walked out and got his own room. They got the marriage annulled as soon as they were back in the States. They didn't even make it 2 weeks. Long story short, the bride was consumed with the wedding, not the marriage. That's usually a pretty good indication of how long it will last. The couples who are focused on the marriage, making the other person's wishes known, bringing in fun and memorable details that pertain to the relationships, etc., tend to last. Those who are focused on the production of the event tend to not stay together forever. Not a photographer/videographer, but I have this weird sixth sense where I can read people and situations really well. Without trying to sound like a pompous ass, if I meet a couple I can usually tell within about 40 minutes of knowing them if their relationship will A. result in a marriage, B. long term but no marriage, or C. a breakup, and what will be the cause of the breakup/divorce if they are already married. It is to the point that some acquaintances of my friends have asked me to hang out with them, and they're so to get a read on their relationship. It is honestly a blessing and a curse. I should really market myself as a relationship whisperer. I'm also really good at predicting how long a new hire will last at work, so much so that my boss now brings me into most interviews. I'm assuming a lot of nervous brides are going to read this post, so I'll give some advice and most of it should hopefully seem like common sense, but I've talked to people that have said, whoa, I've never thought of that. So, wedding specific things I have noticed. Yes, the cake smash power dynamic. See other posts. The first dance. Choreographed dances aside, if a couple is genuinely having fun with a dance, if they are laughing and smiling and talking to each other, and kissing and just lost in their own little world, and ignoring everything around them, this is a really good sign. Now this kind of seems like a duh. That is how the first dance should be, but I can't tell you how many times I've witnessed a different kind of first dance. If the couple takes the dance very seriously and spend the whole time doing the same slow dance move and remain silent the whole time, this is a bad sign. If the groom does not want to do the first dance and doesn't care what the first song will be, that is a bad sign. If the bride is embarrassed and literally cuts the dance short and says that's enough, somebody else please come up and dance to, that is not a great sign. Take it in. Enjoy this one moment of the reception, where it is basically just the two of you alone together, to have a semi-private moment. Not a photographer/videographer, but I have this weird sixth sense, where I can read people and situations really well. Without trying to sound like a pompous ass, if I meet a couple I can usually tell within about 40 minutes of knowing them if their relationship will A. result in a marriage, B. long term but no marriage, or C. a breakup, and what will be the cause of the breakup/divorce if they are already married. It is to the point that some acquaintances of my friends have asked me to hang out with them, and they're so to get a read on their relationship. It is honestly a blessing and a curse. I should really market myself as a relationship whisperer. I'm also really good at predicting how long a new hire will last at work, so much so that my boss now brings me into most interviews. I'm assuming a lot of nervous brides are going to read this post, so I'll give some advice and most of it should hopefully seem like common sense, but I've talked to people that have said, whoa, I've never thought of that. So, wedding specific things I have noticed. Yes, the cake smash power dynamic. See other posts. The first dance. Choreographed dances aside, if a couple is genuinely having fun with a dance, if they are laughing and smiling and talking to each other, and kissing and just lost in their own little world, and ignoring everything around them, this is a really good sign. Now this kind of seems like a duh. That is how the first dance should be, but I can't tell you how many times I've witnessed a different kind of first dance. If the couple takes the dance very seriously and spend the whole time doing the same slow dance move and remain silent the whole time, this is a bad sign. If the groom does not want to do the first dance and doesn't care what the first song will be, that is a bad sign. If the bride is embarrassed and literally cuts the dance short and says that's enough, somebody else please come up and dance to, that is not a great sign. Take it in. Enjoy this one moment of the reception, where it is basically just the two of you alone together, to have a semi-private moment. How often is the couple together during the reception? The reception is a crazy time. The married couple has to give some time to every person that attended the wedding and make them feel included and like they are happy they came to the wedding, even if it is your third cousin you haven't seen in 10 years. I've noticed the more time the couple spends together, the more likely the marriage will last. If they are holding hands and are just clearly a cohesive unit that night, it is a really good sign. Nothing is sadder than a drunk bride spending 40 minutes trying to unsuccessfully find her groom, resulting in her crying. I get personal space and needing some alone time, and yes, day of wedding day sheet is stressful, but it is one day where everyone has come together to celebrate you too. If you can't spend that one night excitedly next to your spouse, or your spouse can't with you, you might want to reconsider. 3.5. If one member of the couple eats at the wedding and the other does not, bad sign. Side note, make sure you have a friend, family member / planner who is in charge of making sure the couple eats some of the meal to eat for. If one of the spouses refuses to dance at the wedding at all, and the other spouse wants them to dance with them, but can't coax them out to the dance floor after their first dance, that is an incredibly bad sign. Look, I get it. Dancing is not for everyone, but again, this is one day where the whole event is to have fun and celebrate the couple. Dance to a couple of songs if your partner wants to dance with you. 5. If both members of the couple get just absolutely blackout drunk, or hell, if one of them gets blackout drunk, that is a bad sign. Have a drink to calm the nerves, sure, but not so much that you won't remember any part of the wedding day. 6. Is the wedding theme / little touches centric to the couple? Good sign. Or is it standard wedding package? 4. Bad sign. Most of the successful couples I know had a fairly simple wedding that still was clearly the wedding of that couple. This one isn't 100% foolproof. You can have generic wedding. 4. If that is your style, I've just noticed those marriages don't tend to last as long. Some things outside of the big day, the wedding planning takes over everything, and the couple doesn't truly think about what happens after the wedding. I think so many unsuccessful couples get caught up in planning the wedding that they forget that after the big day they have to go back home to each other every day for the rest of their life, at least in traditional monogamous marriages. So I think you have to stop and legitimately ask yourself, am I going to be happy to come home to this person every day for the rest of my life, even if / when the honeymoon period wears off? Are you planning something you don't love or care about just to have a big, beautiful wedding? Some of the unsuccessful marriages I've witnessed, the couple lost track of who they are and just planned the wedding because they were supposed to plan a wedding. If you are not excited about your wedding plans, you can change them. Point getting married, because it is the next step. You should be happy and excited about getting married. If you are getting married because it is the next step, or because you have a child together, or because you don't know what else to do, or because all your other friends are doing it, or because you are fighting a lot, and being married will fix that, I've got bad news for you. Okay, this post is a monster in length. I'm not a wedding planner or photographer or anything like that. I just went to a wedding last year where I was shocked at the groom's behavior. He was a primary school teacher and had invited some female work colleagues to the wedding reception. That in itself is totally fine. Except other guests told me that one colleague was particularly flirtatious with him, even though she was married herself. At this reception, the groom got ridiculously drunk and spent more time downing shots with his groomsmen and lifting this female colleague up in the air / grinding on her / letting her grind on him / touching her hips etc. point than he did actually dancing and talking with his new wife. It got to the point where I had to talk to my boyfriend at the time, one of the stag do goners, and begged him to do something. The bride had ran out the room with her mum crying at this point. The groomsman cornered the groom and told him to down water and talk to her. They seemed like they kinda made up that evening, but the next day at breakfast she had a face like a slapped ass. Needless to say, my now ex-boyfriend kept making excuses for his friend that turned out to be red flags for his future behavior, as did this event turn out to be red flags for the bride. Less than a month later, they were separated, and he was living in a shared house with strangers. She took her sister on their honeymoon. We lived with my in-laws for a while. The first few months I tried so hard to like them, I really did. But there was one day where the mom, my husband no longer speaks to them for these same reasons, asked me to go grocery shopping with her. I agreed, as we usually had a lot of fun when we do things together, so I was quite happy about it. We get about halfway to the store we were going to. It was in another town, even though this store had a location quite close to our house, but I didn't question it, since she claimed they had better sales and deals, and she says she has an extra errand she had to run and I wasn't allowed to say anything to anyone. Thought it was weird, but again thought maybe she was surprising me, or the rest of the family, because she had done this before. Anyways, we pull up to a random park and I start to get out with her, and she begins shouting that I need to stay in the goddamned car. Very aggressively. She then scurries off into some bushes, where I guess she thought I couldn't see her. I could though, and there was a man waiting for her. I literally sat in the car and waited for her to basically bang the dude for some meth before we went grocery shopping. Oh, and it gets worse, people. The cops being called on her, and the dad and their 2 daughters, who were all meth heads by the way, were a very common occurrence. They were known in the neighborhood for breaking and entering, property damage. They destroyed an empty house for the copper wiring, and assault. I had to talk to cops and basically talk them out of arresting people, and sometimes into arresting people, at least once a week. We stayed there for nearly 2 years. Why? Both sisters had kids, and I felt awful leaving them with people like that. You would think a mom would get up, feed, bathe, dress her kids, and take them to school. Nope, I was doing all of that on top of trying to get myself ready for work every day, or to just leave in general. My husband was extremely depressed and wouldn't leave his room. There was one time the younger sister has just had a new baby, was home from the hospital less than 48 hours, and left the baby laying on the couch screaming. So I took care of it for 3 days instead of going to work, because she didn't come back. I lost my job because of these people, and all the sisters said was okay. That was the final straw for me. Seeing as how we weren't yet married, I told my husband I was moving, the relationship could end, or he could come with me, but I would no longer be associated with that family. Luckily he chose to get out with me. I told him he didn't have to stop talking to them, but never bring them to our home, tell them where we live. He said it's better to leave them behind. So we did. Just that point, don't worry, the kids were taken away by DCFS not long after we moved out. Well, they are not divorced, but it's headed somewhere ugly and fast. They were a dream couple on the day from a photographer's point of view. So lovely, fun, attractive, affectionate, and cooperative with the portrait session that they were giving me dream photos, and as a photographer on the job with one chance to get it right, that's all you care about and all you see at the time. Point: the groom was extremely respectful, polite, gentle, romantic and nice. Bride was fun, cute, friendly and full of smiles and laughter. Except with hindsight now, and with my photography rose-tinted glasses off, the bride was childish, and they were actually really full of themselves. After the wedding she started revealing a baffling and outright horrid persona to me. I was so confused as I finished the wedding on great terms with them, and became quite chummy with each other. And it was just straight up unprovoked random nastiness with no need and absolutely no attempt to control herself. I'm not sure I should divulge all the stuff that proceeded after that in case someone connected recognizes it, but to summarize, she pulled further increasingly psycho behavior, false accusations on social media, and her previously uber genteel husband became shockingly aggressive and horrid too, and contacted people in my personal life. I managed to fend them off each time with my contract, being extremely firm with them, and threatening to end my services. They still need to order their album if they continue to behave this way. Due to her ridiculous social media posts about me, I then find out from friends of friends of friends who work with Groom, and have seen the posts, that the bride is incredibly childish, and has systematically ruined every relationship in Groom's work life in less than a year of being married with this exact behavior. Groom works in a highly professional, respected and public career and has been left with all his bosses, colleagues, and assistants on bad terms with him, and there has been major changes in the workplace. I wouldn't be surprised if the same has been done with his personal relationships. They had a baby exactly 9 months after the wedding and have continued to look loved up and like lovely people on social media, but I fear for the groom and the whole marriage. One of my female cousins used to job at this place where they specialize in bride stuff. They also have this crappy little photo corner with just one PC and a printer where you can design and print the invitations. One couple decided to go for the basement bargain prices for invitations and argued for 4 hours straight. They made one newbie cry who had to handhold them through the creation process, and so my cousin took over and had to sit there right in the middle of their domestic dispute. She later told me that she didn't mind at all. She already knew that the partnership would fail because no wedding party that had ordered invitation letters/cards from them had ever lasted more than 3 years. They buy all the decoration crap there and they're usually fine. They buy a dress and it's 50 over 50. They order a stack of custom designed invitation cards and they're doomed. There was some hope with these two really nice and wholesome guys that wanted to adopt, but they fell short of the 3-year by a month. To be clear, you buy one of the stock designs that the studio offers and you're doomed. There was the possibility of bringing your own photos and editing it yourself, but it was like 5 people who put in the effort and they were okay. I'm a guy and not that interested in the traditional church-going type of marriage, but I had this one evening with my cousin where we shared a bottle of white wine and had this really long conversation to get each other up to speed what was going on in each other's lives. It was pretty dope, but that was a while ago. She used to live with us for school, but now she's got a job, a husband, and a baby, second one on the way. I just really like to remember that night. I used to be a wedding videographer, then wedding photo editor, then now in engagement rings. It's easy for me to think a couple won't last if someone is uptight about things being perfect, or is pushy or weird and the other isn't. Sometimes they get worked up or upset, but as long as the other person cares enough to pull them aside, see if they're okay, and can pull them out of their phase for even a second, that's something real. If one recognizes that the other is having a hard time and cares enough to see their personality change from stress or whatever, that's a true relationship. It doesn't have to be all smiles. I did a reb shoot recently in Japan with my now fiancé, and I have extreme social anxiety. I didn't realize the group shoot would be packed, since it was a Saturday. It was supposed to be capped at 5, but it was 12, and I started getting nervous. As I started to quietly shut down, I thought I was being rather subtle about it. I know it can come across as I'm a bitch, or I'm disinterested to the photographer and others, but my boyfriend took me aside and asked me if it was all the people, or if it was something else, and asked me what he could do. He couldn't pull me completely out of a panic attack, but he cared enough to recognize something has changed in me, even though he was socializing and cold not noticed at all. I realized then that on the other side, as a photographer, or working with any couple, no one is perfect, and even if they come across rude, or whatever to me, it's really their opinion of each other that shines true, if they really know each other best. Did a brief bout of videographing with my oldest brother when I was younger. He'd convinced mom and dad to get him a semi-expensive VHS video camera with the idea that he could go video recordings of weddings and the like, which we did together all of 3 to 4 times. He did 2 without me as I was attending school during those weddings. Either way, it was not a career we sought after, as we were both worn out by weddings after the one Bridezilla we ended up working for. To me, most of the weddings were solid and the couples were happy and low stress because they understood one key fact: the wedding ceremony is just that. It's a ceremony. It's not where you're actually married. You're married as soon as the paperwork is filed, which most of them did well before the wedding, to stop any last minute stupidity from one of the relatives. The ceremony is mostly just a fancy play for everyone else. As a result, the ones who stayed together didn't go out of their way to make it perfect. They didn't stress about things going wrong. They just wanted to show their union with everyone and celebrate it with everyone. The one Bridezilla we did record for was one who exploded about the flower arrangements not being the right shade. Cussed out the catering service for not having exactly the right number of cupcakes on the platter, despite the fact that cramming them all on the intended platter would have had them falling over the edges, and insulted or trash talked about what all the non-bridesmaids were wearing to said bridesmaids. She ended up divorcing her hubby about 2-3 months after the ceremony because he wasn't Mr. Right Pointo, and she also tried to stiff us when it came to paying the bill. Her mother ended up paying on her behalf. Wedding photographer here with 100 plus weddings under my belt. Maybe it's just me, but so far most of my couples have stayed together. I'm a very low-key relaxed person, and I purposely don't take on brides or grooms who are high-strung. I'm assuming for that reason, most of the couples I've photographed have worked through any problems. Red flag for one couple who actually broke up before the wedding. Bride was making somewhat uncomfortable jokes about her husband to be during their engagement session while he was standing right there. I'm assuming she thought she was being funny, but it seemed like she was roasting her fiancé the entire session. I'm assuming to get him to lighten up for pictures. Not only did it make it awkward, but he didn't say anything to her or ask her to stop, which then caused them to argue after the pictures were over, and he looked miserable in every one of them. Some other red flags I've noticed: brides or grooms who are obsessed with their online presence and need to post something about everything they are doing. This type of relationship actually works out if both of them are really into posting online though. But when it's just one of them, it seems to cause a lot of issues with the relationship. Another red flag: when a bride or groom drinks too much at the wedding. It seemed to cause issues with the relationship and with family members at the wedding. Overall, I've noticed that the couples who are relaxed and not stressed about the perfect day seem to handle issues when they do arise in the relationship. Wedding photographer here. Red flags for typical weddings involving average white North American couples. Some of these simply don't apply to weddings in other cultures. Very young BMG, egg under 22 to 23. Bride and or mob is making all decisions alone/without groom. Wedding has over 200 guests. Wedding party with more than 6 attendants per side. Bride in tears, not happy ones. Day of wedding. Bride more into the party aspect of the wedding than into her groom. Groom banging other person on wedding day. Yes, it's happened. Bar tab in excess of $5,000. Or conversely, wedding is not open bar. Multiple children from multiple ex-partners. Couple doesn't communicate well with me. Doesn't pay bills on time. Doesn't keep appointments. Keeping financial secrets from each other/making purchases the other isn't aware of. Has long list of Pinterest/Instagram shots they want to recreate in 20 minutes with a $2,000 photo budget. Okay, maybe that's just a pet peeve, but most of all, one or both of couple is rude to each other, their friends and families, and other vendors. Rudeness and disrespect over everything. Green flags: make decisions together, confident in their relationship, financially stable, both employed, have already lived together, have mutual pets together, notice things together that they want in their own life/are open with each other about aspirations, style, etc. Budget effectively and agree on how to prioritize their budget. Same religious/cultural priorities. Sixth sense: I think anyone who's been in the industry long enough develops a pretty good idea about what's going to work and what won't. In all the years, I've only called one wrong once, to the best of my knowledge. Some things come out of the blue. Still,